fire safety reasons. And we'll call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
I make a motion, we have an addition to the consent agenda. We have 4 different budget transfers, 2 for residential placements and 2 for the associated transportation costs.
Sounds good. We'll add.
Second.
Thank you, John. Any questions or discussion? Did you vote on that one? Guess we're voting.
Maybe
I
not.
don't think we usually.
Just
vote on
just
that.
so that we have it in the minutes. It's one's for 15,316. One's for 22,550. One's for $62,087. And the other one's for $27,776.25.
And just generally, what's the reason for this?
It's shifting money within the student services accounts from one account to another account, or a few accounts to a few other accounts, so that they are so that the services are paid through the right budget area.
Okay.
For newly for new placements that have either just occurred through meetings and decisions, or have moved into the district.
Okay. Okay, we'll add those to the agenda. We usually vote on those. So with that, any other changes to the agenda? We'll move to our first session of public comments. I guess for those online and in the room, I know it's a different setup than the gym, but we have a microphone here at the back. You can't hear yourself on the microphone, but it's necessary because the people online are able to hear you. The policy is there on the behind everyone here in the room, which isn't convenient. And I'll just ask that, just in general, be respectful and brief. We're interested in hearing feedback, certainly. We'll try to keep it to a limit of about 3 minutes. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but anyone that would like to make a comment, we will have a second session of public comments at the end of the meeting. So if you don't say anything here, there will be a second session at the end of the meeting for you to provide comments. So we'll open it up, the microphones at the back of the room for anyone who would like to make a public comment tonight. And I guess for those online, you can virtually raise your hand.
Online.
So I don't see anybody here in the room, so I guess we'll open it up to online. And I guess one thing I didn't say that's important, please state your name and your town of residence.
Hello, this is Leslie McLean from Jaffrey. I would like to bring people's attention to the policy for public comments, please. I know it's displayed behind the group is what Ruben said, but it says here that in public session, the board will not hear personal complaints of school personnel or complaints against any person connected with the school system. Okay, in our last board meeting, a speaker violated this twice by calling someone out by name and by calling someone out by title when there was only one person with that title within the district. And I think it is very important that the school board raises a point of order and stops someone from speaking when they do that. If they do it once and it seems like, okay, maybe it was a mistake, cut them a little slack, but when they do it twice, that's deliberate and we need to do something about that. Also, the whole idea with time limits, I understand we're not there all day. We can't, you do say you generally like people to keep it to 3 minutes. So when someone ignores you 3 times asking for them to stop because the comments are running over, you must stop the person. It is not fair to the other people in the room. The other thing is you probably were not aware, but at the back of the room in the gym, I was being heckled by members of the community who kept saying, no, you only have one time to speak, holding up their hands and shouting at me, which is totally inappropriate. And I think if we ever have a large meeting like that, we need to put someone at the back of the room to control the crowd, because that was, I was able to handle that. I did exactly what Chris said, which was let people go in front of me if they're going to speak. But it is not good to heckle people while they're waiting online. It's also not good to heckle speakers. And I know that happened on both sides, and that should never happen. A speaker should be allowed to speak, but the school board needs to control that speaker. There was also a case raised directly toward me, and I'd like to bring that up as a point of order. In the school board policy, it says you need to state your name, your address. Basically, we have been satisfied with town, but you could ask for the full address, and the group they represent. So when a member of the school, a union, a member of the SAU stands up, they have, unless they are speaking on behalf of the organization, there is no need for them to mention that they work for the school district. And this is another point of order that I think should be brought up to stop bad behavior. It is not correct to call someone out because they work for the school district. So I would really appreciate it if, I know people have a lot to say, they want to hear them, but we've got to get the public comments under control so they're useful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. And I guess I'll just address that and the fact that, I've received a lot of feedback, as the chair about, the public comment there. Some good, some bad, mostly bad as usual. But I will say that I do agree with a lot of the points that Leslie made there. She's absolutely right. And certainly going forward, you have to understand in like the last year, that's like 50 times as much public comment as we've got. I know it's very emotional, so I definitely have taken some learnings from that meeting, and we'll apply it going forward. So Leslie, appreciate the comments, and yeah, totally agree. We could do a better job of managing that public comment session. And I had hoped to maybe do that with the lengthy statement I made at the beginning, asking people to, maintain order so we wouldn't have to, but it doesn't always work out that way. So we'll do better next time. Any other public comment?
Hi, Allison Marr, 15 Ware Farm Lane in Ringe. I just wanted to mention, I heard from a few board members. I sent an email earlier this evening about the New Hampshire, I always do it the wrong way, fair funding project, or I always mix it up. But Casey Neal was a great resource. I feel like it could really be beneficial to our community if we were able to bring that in. And I just wanted to reiterate that if you're interested, I'm more than happy to act as a liaison. And she said that they're typically booking like 5 to 6 weeks out, but we could certainly have a conversation if you're interested about what the best timing of that would be. So just let me know and I'll be happy to help you coordinate that.
Any other public comment? Either online or in the room? Give it another second. Doesn't look like we have our student representative
She's preparing for a competition.
here tonight. She's probably preparing for a cheer
She's
competition right
down
down there.
Yep.
So we'll move into the superintendent's report. I know that Ruben has some information to present. That's probably why everyone's here tonight. A little bit more detail with regard to what's going on with the budget. So I'll let him proceed, and then we can kind of start the discussion amongst the board.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is just to continue the conversation that we have already been having over half a year now, but certainly more in a more intense way since deliberative session. I'll try to be loud enough for people here in person. Most of this is just, it's not new information. It might be the same information, but a little deeper or shown in a different way. Again, I don't have decision-making powers here. It's more, sometimes I'm giving suggestions, or I'm giving scenarios that are likely scenarios. But I don't believe, unless the board makes motions and decides that they'll be making decisions tonight. But this is going to be information that is factual, up to date. And hopefully, if you have any questions, on the board as to, how we might be able to communicate better so that people understand, we'll try to do that.
Well, one thing that I wanted to make clear, because I think I'd heard this and I think I understand it, but it would be helpful for I think everyone to know is like the process. If the budget is approved, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have approximately 20 days to submit a final line item budget to the state. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
approximately a month, yes.
Approximately a
Yep.
month.
Mhm.
So just so everyone understands, like as far as what Ruben's gonna present tonight are, some different scenarios. We have some different scenarios from the finance committee. But ultimately, once this is voted on, we'll have approximately a month to make the final decision should that budget end up needing to be in place. I think that's just helpful to know. So we're talking about scenarios. Don't expect it to be finalized, but it should give with the idea here is to give people an idea of the things that the board would have to consider. And again, there's seven of us up here, so we'd all have to agree on what that is, but I just given that. Go ahead, continue.
So I was going to show some discipline data trends. I cut it out because of time, but it is important to this presentation because I was just there last Tuesday in this office that's very close to here, looking at some scenarios of our discipline within the middle high school. And it was really quite interesting to see last year's trends, the year before's trends, and then this year's trends, and the lines going in the complete opposite direction in a good way. And I was reminded that several of the initiatives that we put into place within the district over the last couple of years have had to do with how we handle our student support. Over at Jaffrey Grade School, we have something called the Owl's Nest. At Ridge Memorial School, we have the Eagle's Nest. And then we saw that we were making progress at the elementary school, and so we brought that model up into the middle and high school as well. And so what I was able to see was the data from the Perch and how specific learners who are having significant problems regulating themselves, and I won't go into depth certainly, have completely turned it around and will attribute it to the support that they are getting, and they are being able to maintain in class a lot better as well. And of course, that helps everyone in that learning environment. That's important. You'll understand through this presentation why I had that originally in this presentation. We'll talk about CTE, Franklin Pierce Partnership, some recognition for the middle high school, budget conversations, and next steps. So just some information tomorrow at around 1:30, I guess 1:40 is up there. David Dustin, the principal here, myself, Kim Baker, the guidance director, or the student counseling director. Sorry. We are going to Concord to speak to the House Public Works and Highway Committee. And so we're going with the Department of Education. Jeff Beard from the Department of Education, who oversees CTE, is going to present there with us. So then in the evening, we are going to have a session over at the United Church in Jaffrey, and then Thursday, one at the First Church in Jaffrey, just general question and answer time. We'll provide some information on the career and technical education proposed project and where we are with funding, or what we know about funding, because that seems to be where most people want to have their information. And I'm sure we'll touch base on that a little bit more tonight as well. So Franklin Pierce University, this is just a highlight of an example of something that's really flourished over the years, largely due to our elementary schools. Our elementary schools are and the middle high school to a lesser degree, but the elementary schools are the lead partners for Franklin Pierce University, specifically in the area of education and education training. And so our elementary teachers have opened their doors for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, also student teachers to be in the schools. And so we have a lot of individuals through the schools on a regular basis working with our learners. And out of that, as is part of our decision-making process, something we call a collective leadership model, is that when teams of individuals, in this case, what we can call a team of school or a group of teachers, maybe first grade teachers or second grade teachers, part of the decision-making process in anything we do also relies upon our partners. We include our partners, whether that's, in this case, Franklin Pierce University, their students, the education departments, sometimes other departments that they have that are working with us. Science is one that's been working with us quite a bit. Could be artificial intelligence, could be a partner. So you use that, there's a lot of conversation and you're making progress going forward with joint decision making. And when you do things together in team like that, you tend to have a better product and you make more progress in a faster, more intentional way. And so some examples of things happening this year with our partnership with Franklin Pierce is that we've expanded with science. They got a grant over at Franklin Pierce. We know throughout the state of New Hampshire, probably nationally, that science educators are in high demand. Not as many people going into that field. And so they're working on some approaches to incentivizing individuals to go into the education field, working with our school. Our school is helping them with that. We have people on some committees to help them with their grants. And then we've been able to go on field trips over there in our science department. And then we have a science intern. So we do have a memorandum of understanding. We have two major memorandum of understandings with Franklin Pierce. One is for their graduate students. And so they come here and they are interns for us in this case, science. And then the kind of something that's come out of our major partnership are these small partnerships that emerge that are largely developed by teachers. Sometimes I'm involved, but RMS, JGS, we have something that we started last year, this literacy club where students were working with college students on writing stories and then developing them into podcasts and publishing those. I think we released those last year. This year, Jaffrey Grade School, as well as last year, 4th and 5th graders working on Inquiry Scholars. They do presentations at the college. There's going to be, and I believe in April, I'll have to check the date and I'll get back to you on this one. But once these clubs run their courses, they are going to both be doing presentations, the students from RMS, the students from JGS, going to Franklin Pierce in Spag Hall is for short, and showcasing their learning and their creations that they've had over the course of time with the college professors, with the staff over at Franklin Pierce, and with the college students who are acting as mentors for our learners. In order to have those partnerships, you have to have a really robust school. You need to have people who feel valued and available to be able to pour into the individuals, and we get so much more as a result as well. This is just an update. We talked a little bit about this before 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago or so, just before vacation. We had the New Hampshire Education Awards group come here, and we're in the third round of the New Hampshire School of Excellence Awards. We're a candidate for Secondary School of Excellence right now. I think, in the weeks to follow, we'll find out what our status is after that, whether we're a finalist or whether we're something else. But they came in, they were impressed. I had a conversation with the individuals who came and worked with met with our students, met with our teachers, had observations, some breakout sessions. Just thoroughly impressed with the work that's going on here, and certainly with our teaching staff and our student population. A lot of compliments, a lot of things like, oh, I'm going to steal this and bring this back to our district. I'm going to steal this and bring this back to our district. So that's exciting, and it's neat to be in this running. Be in the running for the past decade, we have been intentionally working on going from misalignment to alignment. And so these arrows you've seen before, I've shown them year after year. I did not create this concept. Peter Senge is the world guru in systems thinking. This comes out of his books. But it's a good picture of showing where the district was in many areas and where a lot of districts are. Those arrows could be anything. They could be schools, they could be personnel, they could be projects, they could be school community relations, whatever. It could be a lot of different things. But making sure that everyone's moving in the same direction. Speed is not necessarily the goal here, but going in the same direction to your final destination is what you want. We have had several presentations from our principals of the elementary schools and the secondary school this year to talk about that philosophically, and now in practice, the alignment is very close to being there completely. And so these arrows, again, there's a lot more that we could talk to, but I'm just going to use this arrow as an example. So for instance, we're aligned all the way through the district with our vision. Our mission, we are all aligned with our mission, what our purpose is. We are aligned pre-K through 12 with our multi-tiered systems of support for behavior wellness, MTSSB. That's what I talked about a little bit with the data that I wanted to show tonight. The same thing with multi-tiered systems to support academics. Our professional learning communities, which is for our teachers, but for our students. So with our teachers, for our students. Pre-K through 8 reading, we've had a lot of presentations on that, a number of presentations. STEM, there's alignment all the way through the system. Data work and systems on multiple levels. The education committee and the school board has had a lot of presentations the last couple of years to show that we have come so far. And of course, that feeds our information and decision-making loop continuously. Our activities and athletics that we've improved upon over many years and increased our participation. And then, of course, our collective leadership, which is really the mechanism of how we've been able to move forward, in that we believe that leadership is not a position, it is a practice. And so everyone who is in our organization can and needs to, in their own way, in what way that's meaningful to them and with their partners, their team, be able to show leadership and have decision-making in how the district moves forward. These pictures right here, and I'll start to enlarge some of these as we go along. This is if we were to have the default budget. So March 11th comes, we have votes late at night, 8, 9 o'clock, whenever it's all in, I get the tallies, they come my way. I take Jaffrey's tally, I take Ringe's tally, I look at them, and I know what's going to happen. And so if we were to get the default budget, and that means that if individuals, the majority voted no on Article 3, we would get the default budget. It would function, the district would function from a elementary classroom size, also the middle school and the high school. These are just elementary that I'm showing you. They would function similarly or the same as what we're planning for next year. That's RMS. This is JGS. These class sizes are good. It's good to have class sizes of 12 or 14, 13 in kindergarten, first, second grade. Those are desirable. You get around 15 to 17, it starts to get dicey. And you go above that at those lower grades, it gets obviously tougher as you go. You can probably handle a few more in the third and the fourth and the fifth. But right now our numbers, we are in a sweet spot. We are by no means overstaffed. Is there room for potential movement here? We'll look at that later on. When you think about the alternative, which would be if the majority voted yes on Article 3, And we had a $3 million cut. What is that? A $3 million cut is a $3 million cut to the original proposed budget. The original proposed budget is $100,000 below, or was $100,000 below the default budget that we are now, I would imagine that we would want to operate under. And so that in order to do that, that means cuts already had to be made. And to put it very clearly, we had looked at trend data before in the area of student services. We knew how much we traditionally or typically gave back at the end of the year. And we knew that that number was about $800,000. And so we heard the community say, hey, we'd like you to try to budget tighter up front. We removed $800,000, and in doing so was able to put the proposed budget, the original proposed budget, below the default budget.
Yeah, and just to be clear, right,
Yeah.
all of these meetings are live streamed, available. You can go back to November, see where we started, see where we ended up. That's all part of the process that I'll say most people don't see, right? So when we're talking about cuts and, you know, being a little bit aggressive with student services, which we know is a big part of our budget. It's
Mhm.
also an area we've had significant surpluses. We looked at that and already identified $800,000, which I think we're comfortable with. But it was identified even as a risk at the time that we did make the cut, but thought it was the smart thing to do. Sorry.
That's fine. That's good. And so we then look at, all right, how could we go and reduce 3 million more? And we have to be specific when, after 20 days after, you indicated 20 days, we have to be specific with the state as to where that reduction is going to be. The budget the community votes in has to match the budget we give to the state. We can't like do shifty magic, you know, around and say, oh, well, we'll have money left over, or we'll have this. That's not how it's not a good idea, and it's certainly not responsible. So we do have to identify in order to be sustainable, because if, for instance, the community says, hey, we need to be $3 million lower, then that means that we have to figure out on what our new normal is. And we have to go forward. And the new normal is not, oh, let's try to get by for one more year and then see if we can, you know, get back to where we want to be the following year. The gaps are just going to grow and grow. So you have to, if the community says reduce by 3 million, we've got to reduce by 3 million.
And I guess on that point, I think some of the feedback that I got from the last meeting, besides public comment and many other things, was that people came away from that meeting thinking we only needed to cut $1 million. Right, so why are you talking about 3 million? You know, when Charlie said we only need to cut 1 million. So I guess I'll give you, Charlie, a chance to explain like why we're looking to cut 3 million here, not 1 million.
First off, I think this is flawed, because what we do is we take the proposed budget and then we say, we need to cut 3 million to get from 33 mil down to 30 mil. Okay. What we need to do is we need to look at if I look at the 58-page slide presentation that Ruben did, 99% of that we're doing today. And the funding next year is to continue doing what we're doing today. There's not any new programs. Wit and Wisdom isn't new. The Oreos isn't new. I mean, none of that stuff is new. So we look at what we're going to spend this year to do what we're doing this year. And what we're spending is the, what I want to say, it's not the approved budget, but the adopted budget. It's the adopted budget.
Right.
Okay. Less the surplus. Now, when we went through the finance committee and we looked at the surplus, and before the board voted, we said we've got a $1.1 million surplus this year. And then we said, okay, we're going to spend 500,000 of that on unbudgeted items. So we said, okay, we're going to have a surplus at the end of 600,000. And then we turned around and we said, we're going to have 2 articles, one for the special ed trust and one for facilities. that's gonna be funded from what, that 600 that's left over. Because it's no additional taxation, it's funded from the surplus. So basically, we should be starting out saying, okay, this year we have 31 mil. Okay,
You recommended both of those other articles, right, to fund from the surplus?
of course, and that's
Okay.
why, because we had a surplus.
All right.
All
Okay.
right, so when we go and we say, how much money do we need? We shouldn't say, gee, we need that extra 1.1 mil, because we don't need it. We're already saying we're gonna finish the year at a certain amount, which is a 1.1 surplus, which is 1.1 less than the adopted budget. So we take 1.1 from the adopted budget.
So you're talking about the adopted budget and I don't want to get into this too much, but what you're not doing is including those contractual increases, right? So
Agreed.
adopted, but so. which
Agreed.
We agree, hold it, let me finish, Charlie. Let me finish my statement here. What you're not including is those contractual increases that you negotiated, we all agreed to from the JRSSA staff 2 years ago.
But
Last year.
The JR, hold it. I'm slow, but you're gonna let me finish. The JRA last year, which accounts for like, at least $1 million, about $1 million of those increases.
the JRA was included in the adopted.
There
budget.
was, but the JRE, but we have.
We have
money that
another
need to
one,
spend this
we have
year.
a 550 that we have to, excuse me, 300, 550 that we have to include in next year's budget. Correct.
That's
We
right.
absolutely have to do that.
Right, so that's.
But I haven't gotten there.
Plus the health insurance.
Plus health insurance
Plus the state
increases, plus
reduction.
special ed.
But I haven't gotten there yet,
All right,
all right?
I'll let you
What
continue.
I'm saying is that we should start out with, okay, what we're gonna spend this year. Now, if you add to that 1.4 million, which is the difference between the proposed budget and the adopted budget from last year, a 1.4 million increase to cover the CBA agreement and all of the insurance increases, okay? Because that's what's in the proposed budget is those increases. We're already doing most of the stuff. So what we end up with is a proposed budget that should be a lot less than 33.8.
$3 million less?
No,
Okay, so not $3
Okay.
million. How much less?
how much less? It's 1.1 less.
So 1.1.
So that means that we-
should only be cutting 1.1 million from the proposed budget,
No,
Not
that means
3
we should be cutting 1.9.
not 3.
1.1 plus 1.9 is 3. Okay? The amount that we have to cut, because what I'm trying to say is to do what we proposed to do, which was everything this year, plus 1.4 million next year, does not come up to 33.8, which is our proposed budget. The 33.8 is the adopted budget plus 1.4 mil.
Yeah, and I know,
The-
when we
the-
talked
the-
about the surplus.
But
we
that's not,
adjusted the
but
budget for
that's
the
not what we
surplus.
need.
Well, that's your opinion, right?
No.
We adjusted the budget for the surplus, which we know.
You did not
Yeah,
adjust it for the
yes, you did,
surplus.
Charlie.
You didn't. Where is the adjustment? Show me. You took the adopted, which included the surplus. Right?
Charlie, this is what these.
No, answer my
conversations-
question.
These conversations were.
Answer my
helpful
question.
To come from the finance committee when we were going through this, not.
We tried,
not- Well.
we tried and
I'm sorry,
nobody,
I'm disappointed in the result. I know. you
yes,
guys tried.
because you guys
We
didn't listen.
We didn't have a recommendation. We still don't have a recommendation. And we're talking about it now at the 11th
All
hour.
right, I give up. I give up.
Charlie, I think.
I'm
we're
not the
gonna
only
try
one
and
that can do
everything
numbers.
that's
I'm not the
reasonable.
only one that can do numbers. We got a
Charlie,
CFO and everything
Charlie,
else.
I think we're gonna try to do everything that's reasonable. We will look at some of your ideas, some of which are clear, others are about as clear as mud. And we'll see, maybe it's just our vision that's missing some of your wisdom, but we'll try to do everything reasonable that we can do. But as we've already talked.
I've said what I'm gonna say.
Good. And I'm almost finished, but as I think what we're talking about here and what Ruben was explaining, we can't send the state by the 31st of March, a report that's based on smoke and mirrors.
we can take a look at anything serious. Like the fact that we, assuming Article 7, the money for the facilities passes, we can look at that and say, okay, well, we've got some money there, but we can't make up things that aren't real or that are assumptions about what's going to happen. And just like every other budget that we've done over the past 10 years, longer than that for you, the real school year will start next year. Let's say 5 or 6 people leave because whatever reason, those will be salaries we don't have to pay, and nonetheless, surely we'll find a way to move money around. We'll do whatever we can, right? But we have to submit a realistic budget to the Department of Revenue Administration. We've got to do it by the 31st of March.
So I'll explain this, and just because before I get into this, I'll explain one more thing. We did give back 1.7 million last year. That was a lot. That's certainly not how we would normally want to keep things even. We're again thankful that that was able to, during a difficult time frame when most districts were going up. You have some nearby districts who went up significantly in their taxes last year. People in this room have experienced that. They would know about that. And we were able to decrease in a little bit in Ringe and a lot more in Jaffrey because of that. And so that's good. The reason, however, for that wasn't good, and it's not something that we can bank on budgeting for as we move forward. You have to budget your actual of what you need. And the actual of what we need was to have a fully staffed special education department and a couple other positions as well. We were asked last time, or some individual from the community, started to talk about stipends and how people were getting stipends and all of this, and perhaps creating some controversy or some doubt. The board's well aware because we make everything extraordinarily transparent as to what we do. What these stipends are, and that I'll give you an example, when a program over at Ringe Memorial School, let's say, has several individuals, learners with high needs, if that program needs to have 3 teachers, but can't hire any of them, they don't exist in the area, it's a difficult role to fill, in general, because of the nature of the work that has to take place. For whatever reason, we can choose to then send all those individuals to out-of-district placements and cost the district millions, or we could try to find another way. We do have extraordinarily gifted, skilled, and dedicated people who work in our district in different ways, teachers as well as administrators, who do double duty. So they do their typical roles and they do another role, or they do 50% duty. And when they do that and performing and giving the kids what they need, they do it at a significant cost to themselves. But while that's happening, we're not going to not pay them extra for the work that they're doing. Now, the community benefits from a financial standpoint for a short period of time, because you're not paying all those benefits, you're not paying the actual salaries of what those other 3 teachers were and so forth. So you end up getting 600, or in that case, in that one scenario, you get a couple $100,000, overage, or as I say, surplus. And so that would end up going back. But it happens at the expense of people, and it's a short-term solution. People can't continue to do that. The goal is to actually hire the positions that are needed for that program, because you're not guaranteed from year to year. We're so thankful for the people who volunteer and step up to do that. And again, they're doing amazing work. People in this district are doing amazing work because they care and they are skilled to do so. But we cannot budget in a manner that suggests we're going to continue to function that way. It's just not okay. We can't say we're going to budget in a way that takes advantage of X number of people. Because it's cheaper. It's financially cheaper some ways, yes. So that's why we're going to differ in how we interpret the development of budgets. It is a $3 million cut. When someone says cut it by 3 million and it's 33 million and some change, then you're cutting it by 3 million to get down to 30 million and some change. Simple subtraction. It's not a hard concept. Okay. 3 million doesn't become 1 million. It doesn't become 2 million and so forth. We actually have to match the 3 million. Now, sometimes in that process, we're not even getting to this yet. Like was stated, people take different jobs. We hire new people. Sometimes if you lose individuals who were more expensive, you hire people who cost a little bit less, then that alters everything, but that's not something you necessarily can plan for entirely. This is a scenario, all these scenarios, except for the last one I'm going to show tonight, focus on 3 million. And there's different concepts, and these aren't exact. They're not really all that different than what I've shared already, except to go a little bit more in depth into what some of those numbers mean. So I have in blue kind of, all right, here are the base cuts. These are the things that kind of, if you get the 3 million reduction, you deal with. You take away raises for whether it be in part or all of SAU, non-exempt, exempt, JRAO, 23 members. Individuals, it's always interesting to me when people get upset about unionized organizations and then you don't take care of the ones who aren't in a union. But that's a whole nother conversation. But that is something that we could do. Books and periodicals district-wide for a year, we could probably get by that and try to figure out what to do in the future. Professional development, that's really very foolish to do because that's a lifeblood to the development of what you're trying to do. But for a year, keep things status quo, you could. Facilities, you could not paint and carpet or paint and flooring. You could do that for a year. Again, it's not wise to not keep your facilities that are very old, in good repair, but you could get by with that. But those are an SAU job consolidation. I've had enough people ask me what that even means. I don't know necessarily what that means because I'd have to find out how all the other cookies crumble in a sense, because if you'd have to, job consolidation means like, are there roles that someone has in a position or a couple people have in a position that can be dispersed to other people so that you can remove a position? That's the idea. But you have to see how the whole system domino effect, the dominoes fall. So we go into another area, red. So red is athletics and activities. And so I broke it up into activities and athletics and what goes into that. So in all of that, transportation's about 162,000. Co-curriculars, and what co-curriculars means is that could be National Honor Society, Student Council, it could be clubs. It's a variety of usually non-athletic activities. And so drama performances and so forth are all embedded into that number right there. And then we get into the athletic side of things. You have middle school coaches, middle school referees, high school coaches, high school referees. Once you involve a sport that has referees, that means you have the transportation. Once you involve having the NHIAA, you really do need to have an athletic trainer. And we've, for like 3 years, tried to get one, and we finally got one. So that was awesome. Our nurses were so psyched to be able to have that happen. And so was our student athletes as well. Athletic director, this is an activities director who oversees activities and athletics across the entire district. That certainly could be looked at, but the two of those positions, if you were to eliminate everything, you could remove those positions and you can see what roughly that would be. Or what's budgeted for it to be next year between the two positions with all salaries, benefits, New Hampshire retirement, FICA, and their salaries for the year. Both are year-long employees. And then if you were to remove all of that or a significant part of it, you may not need to keep up your fields as much. You may not need to clean your facilities as much because it wouldn't have the use. And so you could look at a custodian. What that would really probably be is not so much I didn't put benefits in there because you'd really look like two part-time people. You couldn't just eliminate one full 8-hour shift. But you could eliminate a couple part-times perhaps, and then grounds. And someone who focuses on grounds, that could happen as well. In theory, that could take place if you remove the need to the use of it, the use of the facilities. So that's a concept.
I think as far as athletics go,
Yeah.
it might be important to talk about now that you've finished it up. And
Sure.
I'm gonna ask somebody else to explain it, because I've tried to explain this a few times.
Sure.
And I think I've failed, but I think the question has come up like, well, we don't need to cut it. We can just do pay for play. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I understand it in my head, but I've had a tough time verbalizing to people like why this wouldn't apply in this situation, or what the challenge would be there. So I don't know who wants to speak to that, but
Yeah, I can, if anyone online who has the information for how to speak to that, Carrie or someone else, they can. But in general, basically what ends up happening is when you cut 3 million, you have to cut the expenses by 3 million. And so you can have, yeah, and she'll do this better than I, but the pay to play means you're bringing in revenue. Well, you still have to budget your expenses. And so if you're going to say that athletics is going to cost $300,000, let's say, let's just use that number, and somehow it's going to be raised through charging people. Now, there's a philosophical reason why that would be an issue for everything that we've done as an entire system. But pushing that aside, you would still have to budget the expense of 300,000. And so that's if you don't cut that expense out, then you've got to cut 300,000 out of another area. That's the issue there. It's like the Little Oriole Center in that green area. The Little Oriole Center brings in revenue, but I can cut the expense of $170,000 for the entire thing. That brings that 300,000 down to that number that the district would need.
yeah. So I think that to me,
And
that
Carrie should be the one who describes it better.
So, I mean, what you're saying is
Mhm.
that even if we pay to play,
Mhm.
we have to budget a $400,000 expense,
Mhm.
that we don't offset that with a revenue. Because that's what the pay to play is. You pay the 400,000 in order to play.
Mhm.
So to me, that's a wash. That's not a,
it's a wash tax wise, but not expense wise.
Right, because the pay to
yeah, but
play
it
that we-
also adds revenue.
Right.
So it adds revenue to it as
Right.
well.
which would become part of the surplus.
Correct.
Right, right.
But what we've been asked to do is cut the budget, not minimize the tax impact, right?
And that's the difference.
That is the difference.
Right, so if this, let's say if this was brought forth,
But-
as-
Wait a minute. Isn't the budget the expenses minus the revenue?
I
That's
think-
what the
I think-
budget
I
is.
think- I think Carrie.
The budget is made up of revenue and expenses. It's not an expense budget. It's a operating budget.
right, well, maybe we can get some clarification on that.
Is Carrie there?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so the budget, you budget the expenses in the budget and then you budget the revenues. So the revenues are budgeted separately from the expenses. So you can't net your expenses with revenues. You have to budget your gross budget. So in order to be able to spend money, you have to have approval to spend that money. And then you would budget revenues to reduce the tax impact. The revenues don't offset your expense. So when we're putting on the warrant article 3, it's what our expenses are. It's not reduced by revenue. What's reduced by revenue is what the appropriations submitted to the towns for the assessments. So that's when the revenue is applied to reduce the tax impact. So
Okay.
even if we had pay to play, we would budget revenue for that pay to play, and that would reduce the tax impact, but you still have to budget the expense.
Correct.
And I guess to me, that brings up, like, if we were to consider something like this, the time to do it would be like in November or December, when we could plan this. Right now, it's leaving us in a situation where, maybe we could have offset the tax impact by doing that, but the way it's been done now with just a $3 million cut, all we can do is cut to hit the number.
Yeah, and I'll just go on record as saying that none of this should be cut. And pay to play is a disgraceful concept for a school district that has improved as much as it has in the past decade. It really puts on so many levels a district back to an age where it is not best for all learners.
It discriminates against people who can't pay also.
Well, there's no question that is absolutely the case. It's on so many levels. So
And you do the same
Yep.
thing with,
Mhm.
with pre-K, right?
Mm.
Like why we don't just start charging for pre-K. It's the same scenario.
Well,
Pay to play.
and pre-K, well, pre-K has, so we get into the green, thank you, transitioned so nicely. So we get into the green where, all right, this now gets into staffing and programs. The research on early childhood birth to 5, early learning, early quality, affordable learning is so clear and so deep and so prevalent. And part of it, if we're talking about finances, is that for the money you put into early childhood of a quality nature, you get as a community so much more. That investment, just like any investment, if you're going to invest to retire and so forth, it's going to take years for that to grow, but it is going to make a difference. And I would be more than happy to spend an hour or two, maybe half an hour, talking about at another time the research on early childhood. Jaffrey Ringe Cooperative School District is one of the only districts in the entire state to offer universal access to 4-year-old full-day pre-K. And they do it in a fairly inexpensive way. And certainly we took advantage of federal funds to get this going. We've been doing this over years. This is something would be so sad to lose, and it's definitely going in reverse. And it's a losing it, just like losing anything else here, especially, you know, our growth in athletics and co-curriculars as well. Is making that conscious decision, knowing that that would likely be one of the first things would have to go because it is not required by law, is a very short-sighted, not future-focused community decision. So as a community in Jaffrey and Ringe, you want your communities to be more robust and to thrive 10, 15 years down the road, make smart investments now. Investing in early childhood, there isn't a better investment. So, but that would need to go 400,000. That is, I don't know how you get around that.
So this
Yep.
is a list of options. It's not.
It
a
is
list-
options. It
It's
is
not a
options.
list of recommendations.
I don't recommend any of these. But this is something that you'd have to strongly consider with.
I would
three-
not. That would be the last thing that I'd consider.
It would be a horrible thing to consider. It would be it's a horrible.
I
thing
mean,
to
I could
consider.
find $400,000 someplace else.
Oh, okay, so. Okay, so. You can see the rest right here. It's, you know, behavior support. We have behavior support admin. We have behavior support not admin, which is teacher support. The reason why I put both of those in there is because those are not classroom teacher positions. So this one right here minimizes the loss of classroom teachers, keeps applied arts. So that's, you know, if you believe that's the important thing to do, this is a path. All these can be mixed and matched. This is one where you look at keeping athletics and activity, saying, we think that might be the most important thing to not touch. What that ends up doing is that's a heavy FTE reduction model. So that would be saying, we've got to, you know, we have the base cuts. We're not going to talk about those again. The 4-year-old pre-K, we'd look at 6 elementary teachers possibly. I'll show you what that looks like in another area. The little Oriole Center again. I saw this online because I do read everything that is online. It's highly interesting. Very informative. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people's misconceptions, but the Little Orioles, we do take in revenue, we do subsidize it with other revenues, and also with the concept that we know that it's about $20,000 to replace a person that you've been putting so much into. We know that if that Little Oriole Center goes, and maybe it's not 170,000, it doesn't seem like, oh, we shouldn't, that's not necessary. We know that you would lose positions that you would be very hard pressed to replace. We're not going to talk about who those are or what that is, all personal stuff. We know that that's the society we live in. That's the area of the state we live in. We have people who travel very far because they love being here and they love the community that has been developed. We have an amazing culture here. That is a necessity for people to be able to make the choice to travel. So that's just an aside. It is truth that, and it's not a fear-mongering tactic. It is, I know I spend a lot of time in that center. And I know all the kids and I know all the parents very well.
I heard you change diapers too.
Changed 2 this morning. So yeah, so it's wonderful, but it's absolutely necessary. And then we have three middle school. We could look at seeing how we could do some core teachers there. That would probably reverse some of our literacy efforts. Unified arts, we could start looking at unified arts in the elementary and in the middle. And then looking at maybe some consolidation within the high school. That would be tougher. We already know that we're close to the lowest in spending in high school. So we could, but we're not the lowest, so you could get there. That's a possibility. 3 million is a lot of money. You have to take big areas to get to that spot. 75% of the budget is staffing. Another 3 would be keeping unified arts. And this is one that because it's a topic of conversation. Similar to some others that we have, you can see these items popping up over and over and over again. And you could look at other positions. But the school board does have currently some money that if it carried it over for the following year from the unassigned fund balance, that they could utilize like 2% or 2.5% of it to help with that. That still runs into the difficulty of budgeting it, because you still have to budget like expenses and so forth. And this would be, you'd have to have a public hearing to even spend that money, and you have to know what you're going to spend the money on before you even have the public hearing. So you'd have to kind of find out what area are you going to cut 500,000 from now that you're not really going to end up cutting. In a sense, it's kind of fuzzy math, but there's an idea and a conversation that the board could use something that we would normally reserve for emergency situations and do that. Problem is with that, whenever you start doing that sort of thing, you can't sustain it. If you can't sustain it, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Can you just explain for what unified arts is, I guess?
Yeah, sure. Unified arts. Well, there's some unified arts that you can't cut. Unified arts like art, music, those are required by law. So physical education, those 3 you need to have. But we have STEM, which we have all the way through the system. That's okay. That is a very important subject matter to have in the 21st century, all the way through your system. The district should be very proud that they have that. The technology is not necessarily a required subject area, at least in elementary. So those types of roles, you'd have to find out. You could, for instance, and again, not recommending, you could say, oh, we have 6 unified arts, we'd like to keep them all, but we're going to cut everything in half. So those people are going to travel to both schools and kind of give some instruction to kids. That's a model that you would see in other school districts, smaller school districts usually. Or you could say, no, we're just going to do the ones that are legally mandated, and we'll use the rest of the time for, I don't know, there was a comment about test scores. We could do test prep, I suppose, and put kids on a computer to do that sort of thing and have them supervised. You'd have to get, all of that has a domino effect, because you need a certain number of population of individuals to be able to also allow teachers to have prep time. A lot would have to be looked at if you were to reduce unified arts, but it's something you could do. That's what unified arts are. You're not your math, science, social studies, ELA, English language arts. There was a scenario, this is a different scenario. This is a scenario where this is not the $3 million cut. This is a scenario if you get the default budget. I think it's worth talking about. It came up at the finance committee level that if you get the default budget, if Article 3 is voted no on, do you still listen to the concerns about taxes and efficiencies and the conversation that we continue to have about this topic, and say, maybe we're looking at still trying to see if we can maybe cut $500,000 out from the budget. I put 600,000 in because I was thinking 100,000, the default budget's 100,000 more than what we were originally going to budget anyway. But take $500,000 out in a way that was going to be sustainable, in a way that we'd be able to start the next budget cycle already $500,000 to the good. And so you could look at, maybe we look at 4 elementary teachers. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that's a place where you could. It would be hard to take 4 middle school teachers. It would be hard to take 4. It'd be impossible to take 4 high school teachers without losing massive amounts of programming. But maybe you take an administrator, or a half an administrator here or half an administrator there at different levels. Maybe you take out some professional development and just reduce your paint and flooring cycle permanently. But whatever you do so that it's something that you're going to be able to repeat. And so if you look at that, for instance, I know that we have 3 retirees. The reason why I use elementary teachers, because I know I have 3 retirees in the elementary. If you didn't replace those positions, you have maybe someone else who wants to move to either another position, or sometimes people move to other states. That 4th position, it all could be done through attrition without actually, laying any current employees off. So that's a possibility if you wanted to do that. But I didn't show you what 3 teachers at RMS and 3 teachers at JGS would be, or 4 teachers and 4 teachers. But I am going to show you what would happen to your class sizes with this type of model.
Ruben, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Just because I don't know, why is it always the elementary school that loses teachers and not the high school?
In this scenario?
Yeah, any scenario.
Okay, well, the high school, last time we had to make cuts, we actually made the cuts all at the high school.
Okay.
In the middle school. So the middle school and high school community got together and actually restructured their entire school to minimize those cuts. Yeah.
Yep.
And then still had to remove positions, but they were able to do so without losing staff. So kudos to them. That's collective leadership. That was them. They decided that in like 2 days, figured it out. It was amazing. And then I was told, and I was like, okay, cool, thank you. But you only have so many times you can do that. The elementary is the area where you could start to look at your belief in what class sizes, how important class sizes are.
So class size is growing in the high school, if not better than the grade school?
Well, it's still a little bit different at the high school, because it's not just class sizes, it's the offerings you get. And then once you start reducing the number of offerings, because in high school, or even in middle school, but in high school, when you start to say, all right, I've got 2 sections of this instead of 3, or one section of this class instead of, 2 or 3, then more individuals are not getting what they want. There's constant, you're giving up something to get something
Because
else.
you can't increase.
Because
the-
you don't have, because the schedule can only be worked so many ways.
Mhm.
And so, it depends on where you want to impact. Again, in this kind of what we've been talking about, yeah, the middle school, high school took the hit already, in a sense, but also the high school is already literally spending as little per student as it can almost, our state data says that. They're highly efficient regardless of what people out there say. The information is accurate from the state that we spend less than almost anyone else at the high school level. Now, this is what it would look like if you had 2 classroom teachers removed. This is also assuming pre-K is gone as well. Sorry, the 4-year-old pre-K, we still would have some type of preschool at one of the schools. You could see grade 1 at RMS, you'd have classes of 21, 20, 3, 26, 25. The other ones aren't so bad. So it's whether or not, I think we've been there before. And so could you live with that? There might be another way of finagling those numbers. You go to Jaffrey Grade School. It's a little more dismal when you're looking at that 5th grade at 27 and 28, those are high numbers. Those are getting close to that 30 that the state says, you shouldn't really get to. You could rearrange that so that you could reduce the 27 and the 28 at the 5th grade and increase your kindergarten numbers to 18 per class. Then that's a conversation to have. Where do you want your higher numbers? 18 kindergartners is a high number.
Yeah.
Can it be done?
I couldn't do it.
Just want to put this out there for all of you moms and dads.
Mhm.
Imagine having to put 18 kids in snow gear for recess, right? One teacher.
So
Yeah.
that's an example. And so I put this out there because it's not just dollars. It's obviously it's a lot more than that. And the decisions, regardless of what they are, Charlie's correct. These are not like, oh, we're making decisions tonight or anything, but these are hard decisions. But they are decisions, and they are decisions that will have to be made if indeed we have a $3 million reduction. I guess.
But Ruben,
Yep.
you're also talking about, well, the possibility of making some cuts if the budget is defeated and we end up with the default budget. Is that right?
That's what this concept is. Yes. So this is the concept of, if you get a default budget, do you live with the default budget, or do you say, are there other areas we can,
Can we give something back to the
can
community?
we be more, either efficient? In this case, that's not necessarily being efficient, but we could live with, so that we could be sustainable going
Yeah.
forward. We're not interested in having this conversation every year.
Yeah, and I think that's the exact part of it, is that this problem isn't going away, right? Taxes are still gonna go up. All of these things that have forced this situation into a crisis are unfortunately, it's probably still gonna be there next year at the rate of change. So to do this, maybe we make a baby step now, so that next year when we're looking at that budget and how much we spent, right? We wouldn't start from the budget. We'd actually be looking at like how much we spent and then go from there. So there wouldn't have to be, a similar effort next year. I don't know. I think it's something smart to consider, just given the trajectory of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think also, well, I'll talk to it later. These are some recommendations. So no matter the outcome of Article 3, which is the budget article, trying to find some sustainable efforts going forward, and sustainability with $3 million cut is going to, that second bullet, regardless, it's going to be significant alterations to the district. And those will be long-standing alterations to the district. But we're gonna have to have a new normal is the reality. I can't, people who minimize it don't know. And some, maybe they know, I don't know. And just are minimizing it because they have other desires, I don't know. But if a $3 million cut needs to be made, choose a scenario that mitigates against, this is my recommendation, mitigates the loss of academic course offerings and also mitigates against increased class sizes. That's hard. If $3 million cut needs to be made, consider maintaining maybe co-curriculars. And what I mean by that is clubs and activities like New Hampshire National Honor Society, Student Council. If you don't have your athletic programming like you would have, do you turn things into intramural programming and reduce some of your other clubs? I don't know. Those are just some ideas. It's not ideal. It's not great. It's not good for a school district that is growing in a really positive way in so many ways. But those are things that we're gonna have to think about. Reducing teacher loss is important. If the and the reason why I put it may reduce teacher loss is because we have teachers who work here, and what really keeps them here is one of those things, just like the Little Oriole Center helps individuals who are in need of that part of life. There are other individuals who supplement their income by staying here till all hours of the evening, working with kids. They love doing it, and it means they don't have to get a second job. But if you don't have that type of income, it's not a huge amount of income in the whole scheme of things, but when you put it all together, it's a big part of the budget that we have to consider. It's going to cause people to make some choices. If the district does operate under the default budget, if we were to have the majority of votes cast on March 11th, such that Article 3 is defeated and we get the default budget, then considering reducing it by a sum of money that is not as egregious or harmful, that might be something that we, with the future in mind, we'd want to have some conversations about that. It may be a smart thing to do. And doing it through attrition, which is consistent with our agreement with the associations anyway, that whenever possible, doing things through attrition with people already leaving because of retirement or what have you, is a more palatable way to do things, if possible. I guess, one other thing I would say is, before we get into any CTE conversations that you might have, and I'm not going to do a CTE presentation tonight. You can come tomorrow night over at one of the churches and Thursday night as well. But I do have some slides prepared in case we have any questions. Our district has an audit every single year. Lotzikon Sanderson comes in every single year and does an audit, a thorough audit. And of all of our spending, all of our expenses, how we follow our policies, our spending policies and so forth. And we have, you can see our audits, we have them all. We have very good audits. We are not an organization that mismanages money. We have zero history of that. We get good bond percentages because we have good audits. We have a meticulous department that makes sure that we are very careful with how we spend and and not just what we spend, but how we spend. We're not an organization that is involved in fraudulent behavior, anything of that nature, embezzlement, nothing of that nature. So it concerns me that there are people out there who make statements, ignorant statements, I think willfully ignorant, but ignorant statements about the district's approach to handling money when we have everything to show to the contrary. And so, and I don't know why people in the community would want to harm their community publicly by saying that their organizations and their community are corrupt in that nature. So I say that because, you know, I have my business administrator, my CFO, who's been here dedicated to this district for a long time, more years than I have been here. And I've never worked with someone so meticulous, so honest, so intelligent, so straight and narrow, and has guided this group so well. So many years of taxes not increasing, budgets not increasing. You know, COVID was tough, and since then it's been tough to figure it out. I just want to say that for their sake, my business office's sake, because it's difficult hearing that stuff all the time when they know, and we all here know how precise they are and how transparent they are. We are not hiding anything. We are not, I don't know. That's all I have to say.
And I'll just second that, right? I've only been on the board for a couple of years, so it's been a lot of learning for me, specifically on the budget. And I'll say that kind of the way I do things, I don't know whether she likes it or not, but sometimes I'll ask Carrie a lot of questions. I'll be honest, whether it's via email, whether it's I pop into the office, and I generally, like, I'll admit, like, maybe one of my faults is I think I'm pretty smart, right? I'm like, you know, I found this, you know, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong here. And I'll go to Carrie, and pretty much every time she explains to me why I'm wrong, the whole history of it, the way that I can understand it. So, you know, even it's only been a short period of time, you know, but I've worked in industry for 25 years. I do this sort of finance thing for a living, right? And yeah, I have the utmost confidence in the business office for sure. Yeah, and any suggestion, you know, otherwise of some sort of incompetence to me is like borderline offensive, based on what I know about, you know, Carrie specifically in her history. And I think I probably just told her this the other day. I definitely appreciate what she does and understand how that could be hard to hear people suggest that. And again, I get personally offended by it because I'm like, this is like, we are so lucky to have her. She not only knows what she's doing, she can explain it in a way that, you know, everyone can understand. And, you know, like I said, there's probably been like 10 times where I've thought she's made a mistake and I've been wrong every time. So.
Speaking for the finance committee, I agree 100%. She's done everything we've asked and even more, so.
The last part of my report, I realize this is long, but we cut the agenda so that we knew that we could have more conversation this way. This is Article 2, the CTE, Career and Technical Education. We do have a very good shot at getting this funded, by and large funded. Lots of numbers being generated out there. I don't know, $1,100 per square foot. I don't know where that comes from, but these numbers are, you know, we do have a lot of contingency in here. Our architect put a lot of contingency in here. They use the same formulas that all the other architects that are working on these types of projects are doing because of the unknowns within construction and within, you know, as we talk about tariffs and how that's going to impact this. We don't know if construction happens a year from now, what things are going to be. You know, my hope would be that our community would see an opportunity to improve themselves in the future, improve things for their kids, for their future, and do so for a fraction of the cost of what it is. When you think about, I think it's like comes down to $25 per square foot or $30 per square foot, if you consider what the district would actually end up spending for it out of its own either taxation or what we plan on doing if we were to get approved, start to get look for donations whether it be in kind or financial donations. People locally could bid on it. They could, there's a lot of things. If they think they can do it for less, because that's what I keep on hearing is, oh, we can do it for less. Awesome. Show us we can do it for less. And guess what? We could borrow or maybe not borrow anything for that. But it's not a reason to, because you don't like the number of this to say, let's not do it. That's not thinking about your future. It's thinking about like maybe April and May. And that's just not how communities thrive. I'm sure there are ways if people came together and had conversations, this thing could probably be built without any taxation. Talked to another superintendent who was able to do that, smaller project, but it is possible. We are a community of builders. I hear that. Awesome. Let's see what we can do. The answer is, however, in my opinion, the answer is not to reject something that may be very beneficial for the entire community when you don't have this opportunity. Again, I'm on a committee for the state to look at future of funding of career and technical education because this 20-year cycle is done with us. And so we can either take the funding, we still have to get approved for it. It is literally in Kelly Ayotte's proposed budget. We are the only ones named. We are not the only ones going for this. We are certainly competing with a lot of other projects, building projects in the state of New Hampshire. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes to position ourselves in a way like this. It would be a shame to not have this opportunity. Voters can decide however they're going to decide. We need 60% of the vote in order to move forward with the New Hampshire legislature. If anything less than that, then we wouldn't move forward, and that is what that would be.
So Ruben, real quick, just to
Yeah.
be clear,
Mhm.
if we vote this in, it's not set in stone of like who has quoted this. Other people can bid the part that the community has to pay for. That's not set in stone. We're looking for this to be approved so that we can have the grant given, and then the rest of it can be negotiated.
The warrant article, I think, I want to say yes to what you just asked. But what I'll say is the warrant article is written as to at most the district will be responsible for that 6 million and change, whatever that number is. That number is based upon the numbers that we have here that the architects put together. We only are at the schematic design phase. So the first, there are 3 other phases to go through of engineering and architecture and so forth. These numbers, like we said, we put some contingency in here. It's better to overestimate in a situation like this than to underestimate. You don't want to be going back to taxpayers after it's approved. And we need to make sure that the state puts aside the necessary funds so that we can get that 75 of allowable costs. 75% of allowable costs isn't 75% of the entire project. It's probably closer to 66% of the entire project. Yes.
May I just chime in with?
Yes.
I thought so. Some of the builders we talked to said you should be able to build that for 19 million instead of 22. Well, if we did, and this will go out to bid before the bonds are done. If we get a $19 million project, that's a $3 million saving. And the state will take 3/4 of that off their grant, and we'll get the other quarter off. So it'll be, $750,000 less our portion. But if we can get people to sponsor one of the buildings, maybe we have somebody name the construction trade center after them, and they give us, I don't know, $1 million, $500,000. That is 100% off of our part.
Yeah, we can raise the 6, let's say it's 6 million. We can raise that in other ways than a bond.
Got it.
But if that's what if after all our efforts and we still need to, borrow, we have the permission to borrow up to that amount. Which is still significantly less. I remember talking with one individual and he said, well, it's not worth 23 million. And I asked, is it worth 6 million? Is it worth, you just actually told me it was 18, it was probably really worth 17 or 18, or you could build it for 15 or something like that. Okay. So you do think it's worth 6.8 million or 6 million, 6.5 million. That is what we're asking for in that in Article 2.
And of course, we have these fantastic students in the room, and I know many of them will graduate before this is built, but
yeah.
Oh my God, they are worth it. They're worth the opportunity, they're worth the investment. And to say otherwise is disgraceful. And I know it's hard. We pay taxes. It's hard. But I'm willing to invest.
And so another topic that comes up is it's going to cost money to operate. That's true. So we're estimating the cost of 2 new teachers, because you got 2 new programs, at about 200,000. That could be 185,000. It could be 215,000. All depends who you get. You'd need some extra support with taking care of the building and utilities and supplies. So a lot of supplies. We don't need to have a lot budgeted in supplies because we do have some federal funding for supplies. Some of these programs are revenue generating, and so that it would go back into the purchase of supplies, such as the culinary arts.
And for like our construction trades program, it's already, but supplies, it's budgeted, right?
It is already
So
budgeted.
People
Yep.
I've heard people say, well, it's gonna be expensive. Well, this is like in addition, right? A lot of that's already budgeted.
Yeah. So it looks like annually, right off the bat, you'd be looking at 300 to 310. I suppose down the road, 5 years from that, it could be, salaries and so forth, 400. Utilities could go up, I suppose. But your estimated revenues is every earned individual you have coming into your program, you get for the semester or for the program $5,000. It comes from a couple of different sources. We pay when we send kids to other places. So if our kids go, for instance, to a culinary arts program at Keene, which culinary arts is extraordinarily popular, and so we can't get our kids into any of those programs, but let's pretend that could happen. We would end up paying the other school that money, that tuition for our kids. So we do send 2 or 3 a year over for cosmetology to Keene. We're able to get them in. And so they get $15,000 from us. We also spend money on transportation and all of that. Some of that money we recoup. But if we fill about 20% of our seats, we're allowed to fill 25% of our seats. We could fill more than that if we didn't completely fill our seats with the 75% that's allowed for our own Jaffrey and Ringe residents. But if we, let's say, had 20% of our seats filled, it would generate about 335,000, which means that in not even the best case scenario, you would be cost neutral going forward. Yeah.
This would also make our school more competitive. If the trend towards school choice continues. And in addition to that, in a way, it would make our communities, both of our communities, more competitive, more desirable for young families moving in, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, you have to follow the politics of what's going on and follow it in the, you don't want to follow the national politics, you can follow the state ones, it's plenty exciting. And so the trends are there right now. The things have been going a certain direction for about 9 years. choice is I think an all-encompassing way of saying what the trends have been. And so I think there's a bill right now that is up for consideration to have kind of universal choice for public schools. So if our kids wanted to go to Conval, or Conval wanted to come to us, or Monadnock, or Messinic, or Keene, or what have you, you know, if that were to go through, and I don't know if it will go through this year, but I do think that if the trends keep on going, you're going to see universal school choice at some point in time. You want to be the system that people want to come to.
Yep.
Not the reverse. You can say, oh, hey, let's get rid of public education because that will stop our taxes. No, you'll just be spending your money and sending your kids to a different location, and you'll have zero choice yourself as a community member in the educational process of your kids. So, a lot of other things that we can be doing to improve ourselves and improve ourselves in the state from a taxation standpoint. It's not cutting $3 million and gutting your school system. My opinion.
Anybody have any additional questions for Ruben? I guess I'll open it up to the rest of the board here.
I don't have a question, but I do think it is important to note for people who this kind of information is new and it is overwhelming. The numbers are big and they're going to get to the polls. It is important to note that these two major things, although there's other things on the warrant, that they're exclusive. So it's not that if people vote for the CTE program, but vote yes for the budget so that we lose 3 million, we can't use money here to pay this and vice versa. If the budget becomes the default, but we don't get the CTE, we can't use any of that money to build the CTE. We lose the CTE. And so it's right then that vote is cutting those. So just important to know, why can't we take from one or the other? It's just not possible.
Anything else, Sandy? Christine?
So I'm going to tell a little bit of personal information here. We used to live in a different school district, and our oldest daughter went to school we lived in a very rural community, and she had, as a kindergartner, an extremely long bus ride, because I know that was an earlier conversation too. Why don't we just consolidate bus routes? Well, you can imagine what happens to a kindergartner when they're on a bus for 40 minutes during frost heave season. And if you can't imagine, she came home sick almost every day. Another little boy fell asleep and missed his house multiple days. So just cutting things, just cutting numbers means impacting children. She was also in a school district that had a half-day kindergarten, and I think there were 22 students in that half-day kindergarten. So when I said, imagine getting all of those kids ready, that was a real scenario, because they did not go outside the entire time that a winter coat would have to be put on. There just wasn't time. It was the full curriculum and requirements of a full day kindergarten, just compressed into a half day kindergarten. And she had homework, if you can imagine. That is not anything I want for our kids or for our community. To share that with. Coming here, the next daughter had full day kindergarten with Mrs. Firmino, and it was amazing, right? I was like, heaven sent, a world of difference. I don't want to go back.
John, anything additional?
No, I'm good.
Charlie?
No, I'd rather not start.
Yep.
No.
Okay, I guess that concludes our superintendent's report. And we can move on to the consent agenda. You want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended.
I second
Thank you,
that.
Lisa. Thank you, Sandy. Any questions or comments? If not, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, abstentions? So that passes by a vote of 7-0. Next up, we have the minutes of the February 3rd school board meeting.
I move we accept the minutes for February 3rd as presented.
Thank you, Sandy.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Christine. Any questions or comments? All right, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the February 3rd, 2025 school board minutes, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, abstentions?
Abstain.
So that passes by a vote of 6-0. What's next? Action items. So there's no requests to waive facility fees. I think that's just a placeholder. So we'll move to field trips.
I make a motion to accept the field trips.
All right, all one.
Those are great.
2, 3, 4. And I know, they are great, right? And I think
Yep.
that's.
We're glad to have field
I know we
trips.
didn't discuss that sort of thing specifically, but that, those sort of extension activities are exactly the thing that are potentially be cut, and it wasn't discussed earlier, but they're not required.
Mhm.
So,
They're embedded in some of those numbers.
but just to bring that out, right? So, okay.
Second.
Second, we have a second from Charlie. Any questions or discussion?
Just a quick question. John, I know that you've taken kids with the Interact group to the Dominican Republic before, like my own kid. Do you know how many are going this year?
I believe there are 11 students.
Wow, fantastic.
So great.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the 1, 2, 3, 4 field trips, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed and abstentions? That passes by a vote of 7-0. And I think for this next one, I will move to John, if that's okay. Did I miss something?
Before that, do you mind if I just add something really fast about the request to waive facility fees?
Sure.
Request to waive facility fees, there's been a lot of conversation about memorandum of understandings. It's a memorandum, it's in one of our policies to go and develop memorandum of understandings with the communities. We still have to finalize it with Jaffrey, but I have a verbal okay going forward. I did have a verbal okay going forward with the one we developed collaboratively with Ringe, at least the town manager. I would ask that.
Can I ask you to just raise it just a little?
You're gonna start receiving more requests to waive facilities. And I say this because with all this conversation about costs and cutting and taxes and so forth, at some point, you're gonna have to have a conversation about charging for the use of your facilities. Okay. The other piece of this is that if you don't want to do that, and we want to have memorandum of agreements and so forth, which I think is a good thing to do, love to do it. Think it's necessary to have a sustainable, healthy community. You gotta have select board members, unlike what we have that we got from the town of Ringe, who are willing to negotiate instead of sending back a completely redlined MOU saying, yeah, this is what we think of the MOU, and you can go sign it if you'd like. So there's a couple things that was left in there, of course, not the insurance information and so forth. So this is the same type of thinking that $3 million cut came from. This is disrespectful to everyone here in both of these communities. This, I would say, is childish. I wouldn't have a child in this entire district who would have done that. Collaboration, working together as a community for the betterment and health and well-being of these two amazing communities. Amazing, amazing, the potential. Think about the future. Work together, improve the schools, improve the communities, improve the relationships. Unfortunately, these are conversations that we're going to have to keep on having about facility use fees and so forth, and revenues, and figure out how in the world you can move past that.
And this has been in the works for well over a year.
Yeah, I have, Lori Radiola and Dan Bemis were wonderful to work with.
All right, let's move on to the, John.
So wait a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, I disagree with what the selectmen did as well. So what, we're just gonna let it go? I mean, are we gonna take some action? Are we gonna go back to the table with them and, I mean, try to work something out? I don't know.
What do you suggest?
I'll take that action item.
Okay.
I'll get with the Ringe selectmen and we'll get somebody, and we'll figure out what it is that they don't like. And
There
Going
was a
through
lot they
red-
didn't like.
Yeah.
It was all red.
that was, yeah, but that's philosophical. You don't
Yeah.
believe for a minute that every one of those line items, they investigated and determined whether they want it or not. That was all philosophical. And I want to find out what the issue is, and we want to try to solve the issue.
I will say it was not philosophical, because philosophical means thinking. Philosophical means there's a belief system and a value system.
And I don't think name calling is going to get us any place
Right.
either.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
I think, Charlie, your offer to me at least sounds perfect.
Because I
Let's figure it out. We've seen enough of this on the national level last week, so let's not have any more.
Okay. I apologize.
I think it was very good to see.
Right, thank you for showing us that. So this item here, I asked it. Last Wednesday, Christine and I went and met with the Jaffrey Selectmen, and we presented them this letter to Governor Ayotte. And it was developed by the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Organization. And I've got, I don't know how much time people had to look at this or maybe print it out, but I've got 4 copies of it here if anybody would like one. But basically, this group, New Hampshire School Funding Fairness, presented a copy of this previously to Governor Sununu. And they're renewing it this year with Governor Ayotte because she's a new governor, and because this issue is increasingly dividing communities and increasingly before the courts, and we believe something can be done and should be done. So there were, I believe there were 8 pages of signatories already on this. And the people who signed were public officials, some of them school board officials, some of them town officials, select people. And I'd like to recommend to the board that we take a look at this, have a conversation about it after we're past March 11th, and that we participate, either as a full board or as individual members. The issues here, I think, are that something can be done to improve the tax situation for small communities. And we're not talking about, well, they're not talking about, and I'm certainly not talking about an income tax or a sales tax or totally upending the state's system for the statewide education property tax or the state aid program. But there are things that can be done short of that to improve the situation. And when I say that, I'm not talking about a sales or income tax. I just don't think that that's, reasonable. There's not a consensus in the state to do that. But there are still things that can be done to improve the situation. Right now, there's a group called the Coalition Communities. There's 25 communities, all well off. And they get assessed the statewide education property tax, but they don't need it. They can fund their schools at a much higher rate than we fund ours without using that money. And so the state law lets them take that money back. They don't contribute it and have it help the really poor communities, but rather it goes back to those really well-to-do communities. And the purpose of this letter is to ask the governor to work with the legislature to try to improve things. And that's what it's about. There's a number of recommendations that have been sent by New Hampshire School Funding Fairness and by several other groups suggesting ways that things could be improved. And, the state hasn't responded to them. So we're just saying, please, let's negotiate it.
So I will sign that tonight. If you want it, okay? Because the state, there's one simple answer, and it's called accountability. If the state just takes responsibility to fund all their mandates, all the rules they pass, and the requirements they have for special education, we wouldn't have this problem. Problem is, they want to tell everybody what to do, but they don't want to give them any money to do it. And that's the biggest problem with the state as far as public education is concerned. And I think that this letter is just a very tactful way of saying what I just said. Sorry.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Charlie, and it's unfortunate that Charlie and I are here bickering tonight and arguing about over details when this problem, is not really the problem that we've created. And it's unfortunately, it's one we'll try to solve, but we have a little bit of power. And, I've followed this stuff long enough and I know the numbers well enough to see this coming. And, this sort of divisiveness between towns, between districts, between school board members, it's totally unnecessary. And it could be solved if we had a legislature that wanted to solve it. But, until then, this shall continue. Unfortunately.
So House Bill 283 was a bill that was written that would redefine what is an adequate education. It failed. It failed because every single town called or emailed their legislator. It was pressure like they'd never seen before. And frankly, I think we have to keep it up because I chose this community. We could have lived anywhere. We chose Jaffrey. We chose Jaffrey because of the school and the library, right? The sports. I mean, that was it. It was gorgeous in the mountain and the lakes. I want us to keep living here. But what's happening is tearing us apart. And it's unfortunate. And I think if we step up and if we stop saying, well, we can't do anything with Concord. We'll yell at the school board because we can't change Concord. Well, guess what? We can change Concord. We voted in Concord. So we can make that change. And I realize I probably shouldn't be on a political soapbox, but I am, and you can fire me if you want to. But I think we can protect our community by signing letters and making phone calls.
And Charlie, I agree with you. It is a tactful letter. It's not demanding. It's not attacking. It's just saying.
It's a gentle nudge when I
Yeah.
deserve it, kick in the butt.
Right. So therefore, the question is, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read this thoroughly. I mean, I know it was on the agenda, but I know there's other things there too. So you want to take action on this tonight? Or do you want to wait and come back to it?
John, can I?
Yeah, it doesn't, I mean, I read it and I'd certainly be willing to sign it tonight.
Yeah.
I'd like to give everybody, I think it would be more effective if everyone's name was on it, right?
I did not read it.
So maybe in the interest of time, we could give everyone the opportunity to read it and then at the next meeting, certainly do that. That sound fair?
It does. Yep.
All right.
Discussion items, public comments too.
Board committee updates.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So board committee updates. I'll open it up to the finance committee meeting. I'm not sure if there are any other meetings. It's only been 2 weeks.
Yeah, the finance committee met. We did not decide or vote on a process for reducing or reaching the amended budget. And we did not reach agreement on any particular item relative to recommending that item for cutting or not. Okay, so the board basically decided that we're going to allow the board to decide what those cuts were. And Ruben to go off and come up with some options.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Education didn't meet.
Education didn't meet. We did have a wellness committee
We
meeting.
did,
Yeah.
Did you take
unfortunately,
notes?
I did, but unfortunately I don't have, I have the wrong notebook. But we talked about a spring walk to school day. Maybe, I don't know if this is.
I don't remember.
We had a very lively discussion because we have a policy that is pretty new, and apparently some of our middle and high school students primarily are not taking lunch because they have an outstanding lunch bill. And at some point, it sounds like the parents are saying, don't take lunch anymore. And so we have some kids who are going hungry.
Yeah, I think that's something that the board may want, we may want to bring that up to the future meeting. I think when we made those sort of changes to notification, the intent was not to. Yeah. So maybe at the future, I don't know if it's in policy or what, but I think it's worthy of a discussion at a future meeting. I know I personally felt like that was something that we did at a policy level or procedure level that did not have the intended, or maybe it had unintended consequences.
So the idea was that what was happening before was that high school students, I think it was just high school students, if they had a negative balance at some point, very quickly, the parents stopped receiving emails. So notifications that their children were still buying lunch and that they were accruing a negative balance. So it is possible that parents just weren't aware that their children were taking lunches and no one, taxpayers were paying for them. So we created a policy and we changed that so that parents would receive notification and they would be responsible for those lunches. But now we have children who do not qualify for free and reduced lunches, but are still not able to pay for lunch, and it's a horrible situation. We can talk about that more at some point. Hopefully. Maybe at next meeting.
Any other committee updates? Discussion items?
Policy.
We've kind of, Charlie.
Yes, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the ballots will be ready for being mailed out tomorrow. Is that correct?
In Jaffrey, I believe that they've been mailed out today.
Today,
And tomorrow morning, I know that Leslie is going to Ringe to help with that process. They were received in Ringe today.
okay,
Ballots, Charlie's talking about absentee ballots. And so absentee ballots were supposed to come in last Thursday. UPS had a flood of some sort. I don't know if it was a nationwide issue or what it was, but it delayed those items coming to Jaffrey and Ringe, New Hampshire.
now the school is gonna pay for express mail to get those out, correct?
Yep, we already have with Jaffrey.
Because it's only a week. Tomorrow when it goes in the
That
mail.
is correct. I will say that it is not the school's fault that this happened, but the school district will take up the cost to make sure that the right thing is done.
All right, any other discussion items? If not, we'll go to our second session of public comments, so much like the first, and we'll open it up to the floor to see if anybody has anything to say, either in the room or online.
Question.
Yeah, would you grab the microphone, just state your name and town of residence?
Thank you. Kathy Kozlowski, Conifer Road, Ringe. The proposed capital improvement budget that for the state that the school is listed on for the CTE, the amount is like $2 million more. So is there the potential that we could receive that?
I think that's a great question. Do you mind if I answer?
Okay.
Okay. The reason why the amount that was put into that budget was 2 million more is because our original project was also several million more. We had cosmetology as part of the project. So we, through a focus group in the community, came to the conclusion that it was too much for the community to do that. And because our kids had pretty reliable access to that type of education at about a half an hour away, cosmetology was the one that was chosen to be reduced in the project. And so that was the amount, that represented the 75% request of our original request in January of last year. So now our request is less now than what it was before.
I just wonder if it's unfortunate that the actual amount of the request isn't being listed. If it could make a difference if we're competing against other schools.
Yeah, we're competing against, so Milford. And I'm hoping that we're not competing against. The history has been that the department has funded all of the projects that have been put in front of them at that 75% level. Granted, construction costs, if we take the last 4 years or so, have gone up quite a bit. Not so much the last year. But Conval, who's also part of Region 14, and Messinic, also part of Region 14, have decided not to go forward with their projects, leaving us as the only ones in this region to be able to do that. And then also Milford is still going for a project. They've reduced their scope significantly as well, putting, if we both were approved, their project plus our project would match about what the state has provided in past years.
If
If,
the article is approved
yes,
for the center, but the grant is not approved, what will happen?
we won't move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not gonna, there's been some, the taxpayers won't be stuck with it. The project will be dead, right? This is all contingent upon state funding.
Thank you.
But we're confident that our state legislators have enough influence in Concord to make sure that money is approved.
The legislature, I watched the webinar for the Conval school system, the lawsuit that's been going on for 6 years. It's now back in the court. They are trying to impeach the judge, the legislature is trying to impeach the judge who ruled that the state must pay more for the education.
Yes.
I would like to,
Hopefully that won't affect us.
I'd like to make a motion that if there are any Jaffrey Ridge students that would like to speak at public comments, that they be allowed.
I'll second.
All right, questions or discussion? We'll vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, so that passes. Are there any other public comments? Look like we had anybody in the room? Leslie, the floor is yours.
Hi, Leslie McLean from Jaffrey. I would just like to advise the board and the public in general, if they do listen to this meeting or listening to it online or listen to it in a recording, if you see any figures online about how much voting yes or voting no on any of these articles is going to impact your tax bill, and it seems really out of line, you can call the school district. We have those numbers for you. I know the numbers in the warrant articles say like the tax impact per thousand or whatever, and it can get confusing for people, but we can share what our calculations show, and we are the, as they call it, the source of truth for that. And somebody sitting at home just racking up some numbers is not accountable to anybody, where we are accountable to the state to produce the correct numbers. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me and I'll funnel them to the right person to get them answered. Thank you.
Leslie? Any other public comment? No, I think the only other item is adjournment.
I make a motion to
Kim,
adjourn.
I think this being your last meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Kim.
Second.
That's seconded. All those in favor, please.
Before we do that, can I just say,
Yeah.
I want to thank Kim for her time on the board. Specifically, something that Kim came on the board and pushed for and talked a lot about and was a crucial theme of our budgeting process this year was staff and specifically teacher retention. So she felt that there was an issue with that within the school district and made that one of her top priorities while being on here. And in the last couple of years, we've made some significant gains in that area. So thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Ruben. So all those in favor of adjournment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, abstentions, so we are adjourned. Thank you.